Hello and welcome in to another episode of Friar Territory. I'm your host, Kyle Glazer, here to break down all things San Diego Padres and Major League Baseball as a whole. Mike Cameron is out, unable to join us today, but we are very, very pleased to bring in a special guest, Kevin Acee of the San Diego Union-Tribune, current Padres beat writer, has done a little bit of everything in the sports journalism world. He has been on top of everything going on with Padres ownership. We wanted to bring Kevin on today specifically to discuss John Seidler. John was officially named the Padres control person last week at the owners' meetings. He was voted unanimously, approved unanimously, I should say. But there's not a lot known about John and who he is and what he will do as the new control person of the Padres. So we're bringing Kevin on to dive into it. He joins us now from Peoria, Arizona. And we are pleased now to be joined by Kevin Acee, Padres beat writer for the San Diego Union-Tribune and San Diego sports writing legend. Was a Chargers beat writer, was a columnist for the UT. He's done a little bit of everything. Kevin and I have spent many, many nights together in the Petco Park press box watching all manner of Padres baseball. Kevin, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Of course, of course. So, obviously, Kevin, the biggest news this offseason with the Padres has been what's been going on with ownership. John Seidler filing a lawsuit against Matt and Bob Seidler for a number of allegations, including fiduciary breaches of trust, fraud, self-dealing, a lot of very concerning allegations, asserting she should be the control person of the team. Matt Seidler filed a response in court. We still have to let the legal process play out. But through all this, last week, the owners unanimously approved John Seidler as the new Padres control person. And John is not someone who has been in the public limelight much, especially in the context of Padres ownership. What can you tell us about John Seidler and who he is?
Not much. John Seidler is an engineer. My understanding is not only does he have an MBA, he has a JD. And he owned a company for a long time. Obviously was born into the Seidler O'Malley family, which, you get a little bit of a leg up there when your grandfather brings over the Dodgers from Brooklyn. Your uncle owns the Dodgers for a long time, who he takes over. Peter O'Malley takes over for Walter O'Malley. There's a long history there. Made some fine investments, and one of his investments has been in the Padres since Peter Seidler joined the group, where the group that was headed by Ron Fowler and Peter Seidler. John Seidler has been among the family members to have a small percentage of the team, and now he is the third in line of the successor trustees, and he will be the trustee of the trust and the control person of the Padres, controlling that portion of the ownership that the Seidler family has.
Do we have any sense yet of how the Padres are going to operate moving forward? Any substantial changes expected with John Seidler as control person?
Would not expect any substantial changes. Very, very few. If we just said John Smith had been the control person during this time, then John Smith would still be the control person. Obviously, a lot of names involved in this. And by the way, I want to clarify, I said that he would control the family's portion of the team. He's the control person for the team. What I was trying to say is that the Seidler family, if you count Shields, the trust, and then the Seidler O'Malley family, they have almost a majority of the shares in the team. So that's why it was pretty much a no-brainer that he was going to be approved. Now, as you said, pending what could be a years-long process of this lawsuit.
Yeah, there's no question. And there's definitely a lot to talk about there. I do want to ask with John Seidler, there are obviously a number of Seidler family members. We've talked about Shield, but Peter was one of 9 brothers and sisters. Do we have any indication why John was named control person?
Well, my understanding is, Robert stepped aside as the trustee. There are some things going on in his family. Matt's a younger man. There's some family there that, he didn't want to be. Basically, it comes down to that, is that you can't force a private person, right, to become a public person. And the Seidlers are a very private family. They really are. Look, Peter was pretty private until he took over the team. And, look, Shield was barely known by anyone until 2024. So if people are being honest, your Twitter account didn't start really till July of 2024 in terms of any tweets being posted about the Padres. She became far more active and okay, all I'm pointing out is that, this is a very private family.
Yeah, no question. And I think that's what makes this, I want to say disconcerting for a lot of people, but there's so many unknowns here because Peter, obviously, while he was a private person, he was in some ways at the forefront in
Mhm.
terms of, talking about openly, this is what we want the Padres franchise to be. He was at the Juan Soto introductory press conference sitting right beside AJ Preller. So, I mean, there was a public
Mhm.
aspect to him with the Padres, and that kind of forged a connection with the community. Is there any expectation that John will try to do something similar, forge that connection as well?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, Peter definitely then embraced becoming, one of the faces of the Padres. Absolutely. Did not mean to imply that during his time as the control person, definitely Peter stepped up and became not the face of Padres, but like certainly the steward of the Padres and their place in San Diego. I mean, yeah, absolutely. The answer to your question, I believe, is no. Look, I've never met John Seidler. I'm not saying he was actively avoiding me at the owners' meetings, but you know, there are some considerations they have to make. It's hard to argue with them that now's not the time. As angry as I was as a journalist who traveled 3,000 miles, as much as I do believe that it would be smart of them to have John Seidler speak publicly to the fans. And I think PR and that whole thing can be overrated a lot of times. I think it would be smart of them. As much as I say those things, it's difficult to argue that it's not wise, considering that there's been all this, she said, they said, she said, back and forth, things that they claim are misconstrued, taken out of context, flat out untrue. It's hard to argue that maybe it's not wise for John Seidler to not speak until he's actually the control person. I believe once he's actually the control person, he has to at least talk. One thing I would caution people is the last couple owners, Ron Fowler, Peter Seidler, were fairly active in the San Diego community and spoke a fair amount to the media.
Oh, yes.
Look around the league and see how many owners speak on the regular as much as those two guys. So while that's awesome, and we can argue as media, which are conduits to the public, and as the public, the fans, that they're owed that. The fact is, take a look around, and we were pretty spoiled there for a little bit.
No question. Not many owners would go off the cuff like Ron Fowler, saying what he really thought. The heads will roll comment, the James Shields criticism, all those things stand out in my mind. Some of which I was a Padres beat writer, and other times doing stuff for BA. There was never a shortage of quotes from Ron Fowler, and as you said, Peter was much calmer demeanor to say the least, but also, again, prominent in the sense that he was eager to forge those bonds with the community. Kevin, I know there's a lot that we still don't know. Sometimes we see a control person be nominally in charge of the franchise while people behind the scenes are pulling the levers of power. Do we have a sense yet of, whether that will be John's situation, or if at the end of the day, he will be the person with the ultimate authority and the final say?
It's a really interesting question. I think it can be both. More so, what you were saying at the start, it could be that he will be the guy with the final say. AJ Preller, Eric Grupner, even to some extent, maybe Eric Kutsenda, who, by the way, did a pretty good job if you consider that during his time, the mandate was to get in line with MLB regulations regarding debt and make the postseason. Pretty good year for Eric Kutsenda. I'd say basically batting 1,000 as the control person. But I would say that Eric Grupner, AJ Preller, John Seidler almost certainly will listen to them quite a bit. You know what? So did Peter Seidler. Yes, Peter Seidler had his, he had his ideas. He had things that he pushed through, but he was a huge fan of these two guys. Remember when they got 6-year extensions, AJ Preller and Eric Grupner, for some pretty decent coin and some other incentives there. So I don't know that will be that different either. But it's really interesting the way that you phrased it and the topic of the question, because I do think that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, you mentioned Eric Grupner, AJ Preller, Eric Kutsenda. Matt Seidler is still a trustee. Bob Seidler is no longer a trustee officially, as you mentioned. Do you anticipate the other Seidler family members, at least the siblings, I should say, playing a role in the power structure moving forward with John?
It remains to be seen. Look, the trust is a living thing. It can change. Obviously, there needs to be new successor trustees named. I don't have any idea how that's going to go. There's a niece, and I've never met her. It is someone that Peter did mention a few times to me in his just over the years of conversations that he thought very highly of her. So it is possible, I suppose, but that's not something that I'm aware of.
Moving forward, the Padres ramped up payroll significantly under Peter Seidler. As you mentioned, last year they brought it back down. Do you anticipate, you mentioned expectation is things will continue as they have been, just given previous instances of, ownership changes, control person changes, ownership legal disputes. The Padres have experienced it themselves with the Moore's divorce. There's a lot of fear and concern that, this consistently competing for top level free agents and putting together premier playoff caliber teams on the field might go away. Do you anticipate payroll to still be in the top 10 of MLB range moving forward with this change?
I do. I mean, this year, it basically can't help but be, right? Like, there's two sides to that argument, right? Like, payroll is going to be about $30 million more than it was last year. That's without adding a player. I mean, so like it's impossible to argue that. And so the other side of it is, well, but that's without adding a player. So like, hey, great, you're spending more, but you're spending more on the same players. Well, same players won 93 games, minus, of course, some really important pieces. So I'm just saying, yes, the answer to your question is yes. I do think management deserves some credit for that. There's money coming off the books after this year, namely the Eric Hosmer money, and there's quite a few free agents making decent money this year. And so either they'll come back on new deals or they'll be gone. So that money you can consider coming off. So I think there will be room going forward. Things can happen. Who knows? Had they made the World Series this year, or last year, which I don't think that anyone thinks that was preposterous that could have happened.
No, not at all.
There's some extra money there. Now, I'm not saying that's Corbin Burns money, but maybe it's enough to have done something this offseason. There's little things, but, it varies a little bit in the organization, what you hear about what the long-term plan has been. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that Peter Seidler would talk fairly frequently about how they were not always going to be a top 5 payroll, that he didn't know what it looked like. Because he was very vague when it came to that stuff. He didn't want to be locked down on it. He also wanted to create hope for the fans. And you don't ever know what is going to happen. But he did talk about this being an experiment and to see what was possible in San Diego. Well, they've sort of found out what's possible, right? Like, you can't add on the Gallagher Square anymore. All right. Yeah. You can't bring any more Fortune 500 companies here, or you just can't create a bigger market or bring back Bally Sports San Diego. Now in the future, is it Amazon Prime? Does MLB find a way to further monetize? Could revenue grow even more? But as of right now, the Padres are pretty much maxed out. So they say that this is about where they always planned to be, a top 10, which could mean 9, 10, 11, 12, but, around the top third in payroll. And so that would mean that it would be steady or going up every year would be their anticipation. Now, look, all these concerns, I think some of it's been taken based on the missives that I've received from fans. There've been a lot of assumptions about what Peter's vision was, or some perversions of it. There's been a lot of assumptions about what would be being done if Peter was alive, and I think some hysteria. But the worry, the concerns that are at the root of those things, I think, as you would say, Kyle, are valid based on the history and based on the fact that a lawsuit and kind of enmity among family members that hold, when you take it all together, the trust, Sheil, her children, and then the Seidler family, we're talking about 45 to 50% of the franchise. That brings a lot of uncertainty. When do people throw up their hands and say, let's just not do this anymore? So I'm not saying that this isn't a kind of a scary, uncertain time, but as of right now, like, this is about what the Padres expected they would be.
Absolutely. And I think that makes a lot of sense when you look at, obviously, there's a lot of focus on the size of San Diego's media market, but media market and market are two different metrics people conflate a lot. San Diego is the eighth most populous city in the US, the 15th most populous metro area. So if you think about that 8 to 15 range, being 9, 10, 11, 12 kind of lines up and makes sense, especially
One
as
thing
much.
I will tell you, and I learned this being the person who probably most closely covered the Chargers leaving.
Yes, that is for sure.
There, and I don't know if there still are, but there were two Fortune 500 companies.
Yep.
And when you're talking about media market, that does matter some.
Right.
So, they are arguably among the bottom four media markets. So, absolutely, look, they have found a way to maximize that population, right?
Yeah.
And they're bound in by Orange County, as if that exists in baseball, and the border, and then you got the big vast desert between Arizona. But it is a pretty populous area. But the opportunities in San Diego, they are what they are. That's why Roki Sasaki would have been so huge. That's why Ha-Seong Kim brought in some money, right? That's why they were really looking, not why, obviously those are good players, but one of the benefits is being able to take a look at as if the Dodgers need more money, what they're bringing in because of their three Japanese stars is it's mind-boggling. They don't even need their TV money. That's how big of a joke it is. So I just wanted to point that out, that some of that is, to your point, is overblown. Small market San Diego. Some of it is look, they're not Milwaukee, but they are far from Los Angeles.
Correct. Yeah, there's a wide gap in between them. There's no question, and they're certainly not on either extreme. And it's a good point you make. I'm on the Dodgers media list, and I swear every other week I would get an email about Dodgers signed new partnership with insert Japanese company here. And we saw the Padres, for example, they were able to sign a deal with Nexon because Ha-Seong Kim was there. Even when Shohei Ohtani was with the Angels, you saw all the signage in the outfield. It was all Japanese companies. There's no question that getting Roki Sasaki would have been a huge boon for them financially on top of on the field.
Go to Dodger Stadium, and this is just anecdotal, but it brings in some factual stuff. Go to Dodger Stadium 3 hours, 4 or 5 hours before a game.
Yep.
And it is hundreds every time I've been there. So last year was that 7 times. Hundreds of Japanese, I'm assuming tourists at that point, 5 hours before a game. Because if you live in Los Angeles, I don't know why you'd be there 5 hours before the game. And they're there and they got their Ohtani jersey, maybe a little Yamamoto jersey, but they got their Ohtani jersey, some other various souvenirs. They're taking tours of the stadium. The merchandise that's sold in a team store goes to the team. That money goes to the team. The online stuff goes to the league if you buy your Tatis or your Ohtani jersey. But at the team store, that goes to the team's revenue. It's incredible what the Dodgers have realized through this.
Oh, it's unbelievable, especially being in LA, covering the Dodgers a lot through my various roles. Yeah, I mean it's truly transcendent what Ohtani has done for this franchise. I mean, you go into Little Tokyo, there's murals of him painted on the buildings. It's pretty remarkable.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And now they have 3 superstars from Japan.
No question. Financially and on the field, it's a huge boon. Kevin, before we wrap up, we do need to touch on the Shield Seidler lawsuit. Obviously, again, there's a lot that still has to happen. Trying to predict what's going to happen in any legal proceeding is a fool's errand. So I want to be careful not to go overboard and say X or Y will definitely happen. At the same time, this is an issue that is overshadowing the franchise a little bit. At this point, we're waiting for the court to opine, and then we'll see what happens from there on out. Just based on your reporting, the discussions you're having, where do things stand right now?
Well, he said, we're waiting. I think we're waiting for Robert Seidler to make his response as well, after Matt Seidler made his response. Look, it comes down to stuff that you and I don't know anything about. And that's the part that the trust and Consenda management, that they actually struck first in a way. They knew the lawsuit was coming, but they asked for arbitration in the matters of which evidently the trust dictates, is my understanding. But they asked for arbitration in the matters that she alleges in her lawsuit, like you alluded to, the breach of fiduciary responsibility, fraud, and the ways basically it breaks down. She's accusing Matt and Robert Seidler of not taking care of her and her children in the way that the trust dictates. Okay. Yeah. And bottom line is, like, that's her argument, because none of the other stuff matters. Like the trust dictated that the trustees say who the control person of the Padres is. MLB says that in almost all cases, when a trust owns the biggest single share of a team, the trustee must be the control person. So like Shield Seidler was not and was never named a trustee, and so she was never going to be the control person. Like, that's like basically inarguable.
Right.
Unless the other stuff, the stuff that she actually, see, a lot of that lawsuit, like many lawsuits, I'm sure you've covered lawsuits before, is PR stuff. Peter made me his partner, Peter, and all this. And she's setting up for, she should be the control person. But if the court or jury, whatever, does not find that the trustees were in breach, it doesn't matter. That's spelled out in the trust. And that's as far as I'll go, because I'm just not that smart to understand this stuff. But I have spent what I think is probably over 100 hours at this point trying to familiarize myself. So I'm very grateful that spring training is starting.
Yeah, absolutely. We had Michael McCann, the foremost sports law expert in the United States, on the show last week to discuss it. And he talked a lot about that look, it's going to come down to, in probate court, all the court has power to do, their purview is, was the trust violated or not? Even if they rule it was, and they go back and redo the trust, control still might not go to Shield Seidler, because that's an MLB purview, not a trust purview. So there's so many aspects here where potentially, even if the court does find that, yes, they violated all the fiduciary duties to her, they need to go back and redo the trust, they undo a lot of the actions, she still might not be control person. There's so many moving pieces here.
It is. And it's so far, I guess the only thing that I would say is, again, I just said I've spent a lot of time on this. I don't know Jack, okay? I think a lot of us should probably take the same kind of thought, like,
yeah,
I'm not a probate lawyer. I don't know estate law. I shall, there is so much, and that's why I'm so excited to be in Arizona, and that maybe we can focus on baseball.
100%. No, as the son of a lawyer, that was why I was always careful to say we have to let the legal process play out. And when we did talk about the legal issues, I made sure to bring on an actual lawyer, because it's really, really important.
So that always bugged you, just like the rest of us, when we try to get a comment from someone and they talk about ongoing litigation. But you also had the knowledge, Kyle, that it was reality.
100%. I understand it, and I understand that a lawsuit, when it's filed, it's mostly PR. You have to let the legal process play out. Just as much as people don't want to wait for answers, because that's not the society we live in. And again, patience is virtually no one's strong suit in today's society. We have to be patient. We have to let the legal process play out. And as I've told others, no one has ever accused the American legal system of working quickly. So we just have to.
The bottom line here, Kyle, is that the big bummer, and it was my first takeaway and it remains my takeaway, is that we're talking about Peter Seidler's legacy. And there's a risk that it becomes damaged, and a fine family. I know that all of a sudden Matt and Robert Seidler, and I guess John too, and maybe every other Seidler in the eyes of some people, have become the villains. These are people that have been pretty good community members for a long time in multiple communities, and they're as far as anyone knows until now, they're very decent people, and it's like, gosh, what a shame. And then the thing that you and I spent 10 minutes talking about, the peril to the franchise. That's like the only things we know is, gosh, this kind of stinks for like a lot of reasons. Those of us who revered Peter Seidler and those that are fans of the Padres and now have this uncertainty about their franchise. That's really the only things that like we know.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's, like you said, really the shame of it. I know everyone involved, players, front office folks, fans, journalists such as you and I, citizens of the community, hope this gets resolved as quickly as possible and as painlessly as possible so that we can all go back to talking and writing about baseball and what's happening on the field. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today. We really appreciate it.
Right on. Take care.
Once again, that was Kevin Acee, Padres beat writer for the San Diego Union-Tribune. Obviously, a lot of great info there about John Seidler, what's expected, and how the Padres franchise is going to operate moving forward. Again, there's still a lot to be determined. He still officially has to be named a trustee of the trust. That should take about 30 days or so. We also have to see how the lawsuit plays out with Shiel Seidler. And we need to see ultimately if everything that Peter Seidler worked to build remains the status quo in San Diego. That's certainly something everyone hopes. We just have to wait and see. But once again, Kevin was great providing information that I think all of us were hoping to know and can use moving forward. Now, spring training is about to get underway. We're back to baseball, the part we all love. For Kevin Acee, I'm Kyle Glazer. This has been another episode of Friar Territory. Go ahead and give us a review, subscribe, a like on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you're watching or listening on. We would love to hear from you. Keep it here. We'll be back later this week with Heath Bell.